Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session of Lens. My name is Hector Silva, and I'm representing Advanced Design. Today, we have the pleasure and honor of hosting our next guest, Darcy DiNucci, the head of user experience at Ammunition, an amazing and prestigious design firm in San Francisco. Darcy focuses on designing end-to-end experiences that crystallize a business's value for the people who engage with it. Prior to joining Ammunition, Darcy was VP of User Experience for Method and has led UX programs as a consultant with other design firms, including Adaptive Path, Sequence, and Smart Design. We have done a lot of work with Ammunition in the past. They're an amazing firm and amazing people over there. So we're very honored to have Darcy here with us today. I'm going to give the floor over to Darcy. And Darcy, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for showing up. I'll put up my slide deck here. Hang on a sec. Oops, I better put it into presentation mode. So as Hector says, I'm VP of UX at Ammunition, a product design company. It's mostly based in San Francisco with offices in Brooklyn. And my talk is really about how UX helps Ammunition help our partners with product strategy using UX at the core of that. I head up the UX group there. It's a kind of a process we insist our clients, our partners kind of go through just to make sure everyone understands, what we're making, why we're making it, and we really think that's the core, the key to helping our customers' success with their products and their businesses. This is our San Francisco office. As I said, we're in San Francisco and Brooklyn. The company was founded by Robert Brunner, an industrial designer, in 2007, and it has about 50 people now in all design disciplines. It kind of put together a crew that the partners feel was that helps get from the idea of a thought about what they want to design out the door as a completed project. So we've got industrial designers, UX, brand and visual designers, packaging designers, strategists, project managers. We don't do engineering, but we do everything that's required to sort of put a form around the basic idea. A little bit about me, as Hector says, I have kind of a long history and kind of an interesting one for UX for people who are just getting into it. I actually started out with a degree in English literature a long time ago. I did publication management, writing and editing. And then when the web appeared, it was fascinating, of course, because it was an entirely new way of processing and presenting information. I became an information architect, organizing websites at that time. And I did a lot of writing about the web and digital design when that was kind of new. And then spent the next, say, 10 years being a consultant in UX for all sorts of consultancies and firms until I was a VP UX at Method on staff there for a while. And then for the last 12 years, I've been at Ammunition as VP of UX there, doing product and service design. This is from Ammunition's website. It's a nice encapsulation of, I think, what we do and why we exist. We place design talent at the center of imagining and creating new product and service ventures. So the key ideas there are putting design at the center of creating businesses. Using designers execution, designers thinking, designers practices to help businesses achieve success. And this talk is really about how the UX process is important in that and how we think it leads to the kind of success that I think we're kind of famous for. So there's design. It's what people are coming to us for. It's what you think of as usually design is speccing the experience, the hardware, software, environment, packaging, whatever that experience consists of. But we kind of bookend it with a couple special processes, and the one I want to focus on mostly today is this strategy part. It comes before the design. It's a process we as I said, kind of insist we go through with our partners to decide what's worth designing. We take our team and the client team through this process of really questioning all of our assumptions, digging deep into the reasons we're doing what we're doing and who we're doing it for, in order that we have a lot of confidence that when we get to that detailed design phase, we know exactly what we're doing and why. And that's what I'll be talking about mostly today. The other part of that is because we've just done this so many times. You know, I have in my 12 years about 100 or so projects under my belt at Ammunition. Another service that we really provide to our clients, our partners, is helping them get that to market. Once you have your idea and you know what you want to build and you know what it's going to look like, it's really pretty hard to get it out the door. And so we have all that experience in getting things engineered and helping our clients understand who they need to have on their team and the kind of decisions they have to make in order to get that product out the door, manufactured into the market. We help push them through that experience as well. And we're kind of, as we said, we started out with Robert Brenner's kind of core and industrial design, a lot of consumer electronics products, but really pretty much every kind of product you can imagine, from industrial services, medical, financial, to any kind of consumer electronics as well, kind of everything that needs design. And then I'll talk about mostly this process, deciding what's worth designing, this kind of sprint we go through at the beginning to understand this. It really is balancing these three ideas. We start, of course, with what the business wants to happen. Why are they doing this in the first place? What is their vision for what they want to achieve? And then the second part is running that through this discipline of understanding the user and what value we can provide to them. That's what I'll be talking mostly about today. And the third part is balancing that all with what's doable. So what can we do within a reasonable cost and time frame? You know, everyone's heard that you can engineer anything as long as you have enough time and money, but of course we want to get it out the door. So our process is really balancing these three things to determine, you know, what is it that we really want to build as a team. As user experience VP, of course, my core here is the user. What real value can we provide to the customer? And it might sound obvious that you have to decide that if you're going to be creating a product for the market. But we find that without a real structure, discipline around thinking about that, you can go pretty far astray. And we often find that by the time we make it through this process, what our partners are thinking is quite different from what we started at the beginning. We often find that people come to us with a great idea, but the way they've been thinking about their user base is as a market segment, or they think, it's something I would like, so of course people will find value in it. They think they've been talking to VCs, so they understand that there's a certain number of people of this certain type who buy this kind of product, and we can maybe capture X% of that market. But we take them through a process that helps them think about that much, much differently. And it's a process I'll talk about here. It's got several steps to it, and most of them are quite familiar to people that do UX. I think every process I'll talk about here, you'll find in all of the UX books and UX classes. I think that maybe the difference is that we've done this. As I said, I have over 100 projects in my own portfolio at Ammunition. So we've kind of done this so many times that we just understand what's important about each step in order to create the base assumptions that'll lead us to make the next decision in a sensible way. So, and I'll talk about how that process kind of gets worked through. And you start, of course, with a launch meeting. You just get together with the business leaders of the company we're working with and just ask them what they're trying to do. So we just hear everything that they have to say about what they're trying to achieve, what their assumptions are about how it's going to happen, kind of schedule, kind of technology, everything that they're planning on. And we listen and ask good questions and just figure out what the baseline is there. Then we do our own research. We interview the target users. We do secondary research into the markets and competition that already exists. So just get smart about the area that we'll be working in. And then our first deliverable is personas. Everyone's heard of these who works in UX. You document the assumptions about the audience, and these can be based on research or not, but it has to be understood among all the team about who we think will want our product, and not only who they are, some idea about where they live and how many kids they have, but how they will be changed, or what they will find important about the particular service that we're trying to design for them. We then map out the journey of that customer. So this person will be going through a process from never hearing about us to a long and happy relationship with us. We have to understand what are all the steps of that, what kind of tasks they need to take care of at each point. And an important part of this step for us is just understanding if they have to do this task, how do we make that rewarding for them? If they have to understand how to turn it on, how do we make that delightful? If it's a complicated task that they're doing, how can we make that easy? We start thinking even at this stage about that design and what are opportunities for really making that a good experience for them. We turn those into some stories, usually in the form of some storyboards, words and pictures that really imagine the ideal experience for them. If they are going through these tasks that we've outlined in the journey, how can that be wonderful? This is really the first step of design in a very it's a lo-fi way. We don't have to do any coding. We just have to tell stories to imagine the ideal experience. And that can be in great detail. So this can imagine every touch point they come in contact with, every interaction they have, not every interaction, but the key interactions they'll be taking with our product. And we can imagine then what is the best way for them to do that? What can we offer them at each step to make that easy for them? What should that be like in order to make it delightful, as people like to say in UX? And by the time we've done that with the key tasks, we have a pretty good idea about what we're trying to build. And the next important step there then is to validate this. So if all of our team, which has gone through this whole process and has discussed every step of the way, who these people are, what tasks they have to do, and then what we want to build for them, if we all agree that this sounds great, we then have to take it out to the actual target users and see if they agree with us. So we'll do some validation research at this point, pretty much in every single project that we ever do, to see what we're missing, to see whether what we think is great is actually going to be great. And we often take some big turns at this point and see that we've missed many important things. And the product can do quite a pivot. We'll often cut off whole parts of it, add whole parts of it. Some things that are important that we thought were important turn out not to be important. And so we iterate until we've got something that seems actually useful to our audience. And from that comes our feature list. We've outlined what happens at every touch point, so we know what we have to build. And when you have that all listed out that way, you can make some really good decisions about the MVP. Well, really what is the minimum thing that we have to come to market with to make this the kind of delightful experience that we've all agreed is important to our customer, and that will be the difference in our success or failure. And finally, we catalog all the principles that have led us through all these decisions. So we know as we've made different decisions through the scenarios and what we learned from the users during the validation, we've found what is actually important. So we just articulate these beliefs, that will guide us through the design process in order to be successful. What does it have to be like? So this is kind of the process, and I'll show you in the next stage that I'll talk about is just how we use this in some various products that we've done at Ammunition. This is kind of crazy because usually I say, are there any questions? But I guess this will come at the end. I'll talk about 3 different projects that we've done. I won't explain them right now, but one, two, three. One thing I'll say about the things I'll show you is that all of the pictures that I'll be showing are from actual deliverables that we have created along the way in our exploration of the process. So you can see some of the actual ways of thinking and actual ways of communicating that we use with our teams. The first one I'll talk about is the Ember Mug, just a mug that keeps your coffee hot. You might have seen us. It's kind of been in every Starbucks for the last few years. Our client came to us, I don't know how many years ago, 4 years ago. And he had a long background in electrical engineering. He had done a couple of companies having to do with lighting, but he really had a strong passion about having food be warm. And he believed that it matters, and he really wanted to bring as his first product, a mug that kept your coffee hot. And this is often the kind of the position that we're in is, our job is really to help the founders that come to us realize their hopes and dreams. If they really want this to happen, our goal is to find a way to make that happen, and make it happen in a way that will be successful for them. So some people might wonder whether this was going to be a successful product, a mug that keeps your coffee warm. I mean, these kind of things kind of exist in like little USB heating pads already. So how could we make this idea something to be successful for him? So he had, in the launch meeting, we go through some questions like this. So what is actually his idea about what he's doing here? Enriching eating and drinking experience through the application of temperature control technology. It doesn't sound like a product idea yet, but we wanted to know what was important to him. Another thing that was important was that, this many years ago, the idea that VCs wanted to hear about the data you're getting. So there's this mug I'm showing over on this left-hand side, was on the market already. It was called the Vessel, and it was a way to, use data in your drinking appliances. So it kept track of how many cups of water you were drinking a day, so you could stay healthy that way. So that's part of our consideration of the competitive market. And then these are just some of the questions that we worked through in the original meeting with the founders, like, why are we doing it? Who are we doing it for? It's the beginning of the user experience questions. Why is it important to people? Who's it important to? How can we make this meaningful for them? Started off with just a bunch of brainstorming on our part with our client ourselves. Who is hot coffee important to? Who would pay for the experience of having warm coffee? These are some of the ideas that we had. They kind of fell into these three categories. This is the result of a brainstorm session. In the end, we focused on this user. And this had to do with a bunch of decisions that were made along the way. One was that we felt that this shouldn't be about the technology. We didn't want the technology to be part of the process at all. We felt, and the founder felt, that it was really about the coffee. It was really about the warmth in the drink, and not about figuring out how many cups of coffee you'd had that day and keeping track of that as a measure of your success in life or a way to shame you. It was just about keeping your coffee warm. We wanted to make it a very general market process. It wasn't for specialists. It was really just for the world at large. We wanted to make this part of everyday life. And one of the things that we make part of all of our personas is, if this is the person we're designing for, how can we, why would she care about it? Why would she love it? And what can we do to make this successful for her? So we start already thinking about the features that this person might find important in this product. This is an example, kind of an earlier example of a journey map we do. So we talk about from the moment she hears about us to when it's part of her daily life, what are the different tasks that she will have to make possible for her through this. And then as part of these journeys, an important thing we do also is to just document, it's kind of in the middle line here if you can read it, what kind of experience do you want to build for them? What do we want them to be feeling and thinking as they go through each of these tasks? So it isn't just documenting that they have to do this and they have to do this, but it's keeping in mind what do we want to make happen for them emotionally during these steps of the journey. And then this is an example of the scenario that we do. So we go through a day in the life, a day of using this product that we're designing, and talking about how she interacts with it, how why it's important to her, what questions she has, what answers we give her, what would have to happen to make this a successful experience for her. This is how we write the scenarios. And then as we do that, this kind of documenting on the bottom layer here, what does that mean in terms of the kind of features we're going to have to build? And that feature list turns into the feature list. So a requirements thing where we decide these are the different things we have to make happen. And this one was interesting because it has to do not only with features you would build, but features that would be part of the artifact itself. So what does the mouth feel like? What does the texture feel like? How warm is it in her hand? These kind of experiences that came up during the writing about the optimal experience. And then the example of some design principles that we had, making sure that it really focused on things like sensory experiences. It is about enjoying warmth. So how do we make that part of the everyday experience of it? How can we make it so it simplifies things, doesn't complicate it? How can we make sure in the daily use of it, it's easy to manage, it's cleanable? All of these things that just, from the design principles, these really guide us as we go through the design process, as we go into the detailed design, to check with ourselves. Is it standing up to these ideas that we had for it? In the end, is it meeting these principles? And this is some examples of, we did two versions of the mug. The first one was the travel mug, that the black tall one that we show over there, and the second version was the white tabletop mug. And we did an app for it. And as you can see, all of these aspects of it were successful in meeting our ideas about the principles that we spelled out through the design process, or the design strategy process. So when we got into designing the app, we made sure that it wasn't about setting all sorts of details. It was about just understanding, oh, it's warm. It's from the color of the interface to the simplicity of the interface. It was about relaxation. All of the controls on the mugs, the feeling of it, were all about hiding the technology rather than making it forefronted. And so in a very quick way, just kind of going through, I hope it came through the idea of how we work through this process. I want to just make clear that an important reason we do this, and an important way that it works, is that the logic flows seamlessly. If you start with your business assumptions, and then you make these assumptions about the person, and then from that person, make the assumption about what tasks they will have to carry out, and from that make assumptions about what those tasks should feel like and be like, and from that you build your feature list based on everything that you've imagined, what would have to be engineered. And the principles, you come with a very complete set of requirements, and importantly, you're a set of requirements that everyone believes in. So all through this process, we're in conversations with all the designers, with the client, with any business stakeholders that are part of the decision making. So just starting from the persona and making it all the way through, everybody has understood why each decision is made along the way. So that when you get to the end of this, everyone's on the same team in a very important way, that everyone understands, oh, this feature is important because that is the thing that makes this experience possible. This feature is not important because it is not what makes it important to the user in the way that we're understanding it. And I'll get to that in the end about how this actually saves a lot of time and money if you go through this process initially to understand how decisions should be made about the features of the product that you decide to engineer. The second project I'll talk about is for Ollie, which is people quality dog food. And they came to us, they'd already been in business for a year or two, I can't remember exactly how long, but they had been a scrappy startup and they were doing quite good success, but they really were running into some barriers in terms of their operations. As the business grew, they just needed to really streamline how they were managing their packaging lines and the number of SKUs that they were packing. And they also knew that there was some concerns about the sustainability. They wanted to make sure that all this packaging that they were sending out was minimized. And our job was to help them solve that next step of their growth. So as part of the exploration phase, we looked at the competition and understood what they were doing in terms of their packaging. So if that's what the farmer's dog is up there. Looked at the kind of variables and talked about their current operations. Talked about different materials that were possible for packaging. Just again, got smart about the space and understanding what the possibilities were within it. We visited their packing warehouses and the packaging lines, so we understood, what we had to accommodate in terms of the operations side of that. And we also went into the field. One of the important things was they knew that while they had to optimize a lot of things about their packaging, there's also some things that they thought people probably really liked about it, and they didn't want to break anything on their way to change. So we talked to current users and past users who had quit the product in 3 different cities, and just tried to understand how people were using it, what they liked about it, why they selected it, why they quit it, and any pain points they had about the packaging and the food, just understanding their lives with Ollie, essentially. We came back with a list of things that were working well and a list of things that we thought were opportunities for improvement, and made this report back to them about both those areas, things we shouldn't break and things we should improve. As an example of some of the scenarios, these things take many forms, but this is a form we often do, whereas we just kind of pose each other in the steps of the process that we want to create, and make sure that we put this in 3D space and that we understand how it lives in the world and the different touch points that people will be operating with, and start to enumerate the different features, touch points, experiences we'll have to build to make that happen. What are the opportunities for improving that experience? That's me. And then it came to our list of requirements. From those, both user requirements, end user, and the business requirements are really about the operations end of things. So as we do our detailed design, create the least amount of waste, take care of some of these other pain points, and on the business end, making sure that we take care of things like hold 2 weeks of food for every size dog. One of the things that Ollie does is it packages 2 weeks of food for your dog specifically. So if you have a Great Dane, that's one size of food packaging for 2 weeks, and if it's a poodle, it's another size. And that was one of their challenges, is they had dogs that have a wide range of sizes. So trying to figure out how to accommodate all of those different variables without having 1,000 different packaging sizes. We actually hired a mathematician to run through some scenarios for us on that. That was really interesting. In the end, our deliverable for this project was a bunch of specifications for manufacturing. So we see in the bottom left there, it is a layout of a packaging floor and the kinds of processes, if you went through with different kinds of labels, different kinds of sealed packages, different kinds of sealing, different kinds of box sizes, it would result in different operations processes. And that was really our deliverable here, was thinking about the business operations as much as the end user. It's like, instead of designing, for a programmer or a manufacturing line in China, we're designing for a food packaging floor. And our packaging group in New York is kind of amazing in that way, in understanding all the ins and outs of that as one of the services we can provide our partners. So it was really going through everything from how the boxes are packed, how the food is packed, how the food is labeled, how the boxes are packed, in order to achieve both these user end goals and the business end goals for Ollie. And then the last project I'll talk about is cafex. The people in San Francisco may have seen this around. There was one on, I think, Battery near Market Street. There's one in the Westfield Mall there. There was, I think there's one or two in the airport these days. They have a robot cafe. So it's a kiosk that has can make you coffee, but has no barista. It's all done with this manufacturing robot arm. And so our job, they'd already done some kind of quickly built, non-manufactured, but hand-built proof of concept kiosks that they had run. And so then when they came to us, they were ready to start going into a manufactured experience and wanted us to optimize both the kiosk and the experience in any way we could. So over here on the left-hand side was one of their earlier machines that was in the Westfield Mall. It always created quite a crowd when people saw the robot arm making the coffee. And they already had scenarios and software for taking orders at the machine. So we took all of this in and understood kind of what the current scenarios were for how they were managing the coffee orders. So one of the first things we did, getting back to the core value of who's going to be using this, we just kind of grilled the business people, since they already had this in the field and they already had a good understanding of the business requirements of it. We just translated that into personas and journeys for everyone we had to think about when designing this service. We had two user types. One was a person who just came across this in the wild and didn't know how to order from a robot cafe. And the other was for an important customer segment, which were the repeat users who would order in advance from an app. And when they showed up at the machine, just had to type in their number and pick up their coffee in the most efficient way possible. So two very different kind of customer use cases there. And the other was for the support and the staff at Ollie that we had to consider if we're going to build this kiosk, understand all the different, the way it would be stocked. So with every night, if they had to restock the coffee and the cups and the stirrers and everything else, what did we have to do with the kiosk to accommodate that? So we had actually three staff personas as well to think about accommodating their work. And once again, on the right side, you'll see, I don't know if you can read it this size, but both the tasks they're doing at each step of the way, and also what are the opportunities for making this task enjoyable, easy, possible, and having to do with things like the right access to the right parts of the machine, what's cleanable, what's lockable, all of those things that get pulled out of this kind of thinking about the process. So there were two staff interfaces that we thought of. One is just enclosure access as an interface. We know the doors on the kiosk, as well as the electronic interfaces that you use to monitor the machines remotely. And then all of the customer interfaces, all the touch points that the customers would be navigating as they went there to order their coffee, whether that was via app or arriving at the machine. And as you can see, one of the interfaces here is the robot arm. The customer doesn't necessarily do anything with that robot arm, but we really wanted to think about how that impacted on the customer experience. So knowing that anything that's moving will automatically be anthropomorphized, people will give it a personality if it doesn't, and it will be something you design or it'll be something you don't design, but it'll be something that is part of the customer experience. So we wanted to do some real thinking about how that acted and how that would be perceived. I think I can do this. This is one of the ideas. And then the way we spec'd out what those robot actions should be, we did a lot of thinking about first what it should be like. Should it be subservient? Should it be funny? Should it be surprising? All these different personalities it might have. And then we just figured out the best way to actually spec this for the programmers of the arm would be to have one of our designers just act out the gestures that we thought would be good at each point in the process. So when it served you the coffee, when it was not doing anything and just passing time, all these different opportunities for some kind of interaction with the customer in a kind of passive way like that. That led to understanding what all the touch points were, understanding the requirements for all the touch points, and then detailed design for all the touch points. One of the fun things about this is in our office. We built several iterations of this just out of cardboard, so we could understand how people could interact with the machine. You could see what size the type on the sign would have to be, the height of the receptacles for where you would grab your coffee from, all these different aspects of interaction that you could only know by building these prototypes and interacting with it in real life. And we went from very lo-fi to, as I said, this one just made of cardboard. We have a very talented kind of prototype builder in our office who whips this kind of stuff up. And in the end, this was the final design, which incorporated all of the touch points, interactions, interfaces that we imagined. It has a separate kiosk for ordering, separate from the machine, the places where you pick up the coffee. All part of thinking through those scenarios about how to manage the queues, what you needed to have available to you at what step in the process. And then keeping in mind all the principles about seamlessness and accessibility and other things that we wanted to make sure were true, all coming out in the final design here. And the last point I wanted to make is as I said, we kind of insist that our clients, our partners go through this process with us. And it's often not what people think is a good use of time. I mean, there's a sort of principle that's a lot in the business right now is you just start building things, a more agile process where you start building and then you just build upon these elements, so one element after another. And this is kind of the opposite of that in a way. It's insisting that we have a pretty holistic view of the product and a good understanding about what we're trying to build before we start designing, definitely before we start coding or manufacturing things. And there's just kind of three ways that we think this is like super important and really helps our partners out in the long run. And the most important one is, of course, we think it really leads to a better product in the end, because we've gone through this process of user-centered design. We put the end user at the core of thinking about what the product should be. We think about it through their eyes. We think about all the steps they're going to have to go through with it. We think about how to make that experience useful for them and rewarding for them. We make sure that point of view is taken into account. and it considers the full relationship lifespan. So we don't forget any part of the service that we have to provide for them, whether that's helping them understand it before they buy it, through fixing it and troubleshooting it at the end of when they're deep into their relationship with the product. All of those steps of the process can have important repercussions on how to streamline the entire design. So by thinking of that beforehand, you've cut out a lot of trouble for yourself further down the line. You've discovered those things, or a lot of those things, before you start, where you can create a coherent process that takes all of those processes into account, rather than trying to tack them onto each other later in the process. And lastly, it really clarifies what's important. By going through this process with the business team, with all the designers, everybody knows by the end of this strategy process why this feature is in there, why, who the customer is, and what we want to do for them, and why this feature isn't in there and can be cut out. So it helps everybody understand, as they make decisions down the line, how to make those decisions, which leads to the second thing, which is a better team. So the group is all in on these decisions. Everyone understands everybody else. There's no cross purposes that we're working at. We all agree that these things are important and this is what we should build. There should be a P in priorities there. Clear product priorities that I just referred to is when you start making these decisions about what's in the first release, what you should really invest in building, versus what you needn't to invest in building, because you understand why these decisions were made. That all becomes pretty clear. And then time and money. This is really, the scenarios are really the lowest resolution prototyping you can do. It's just, words and pictures on a page. It's very quick to do, but by doing that, you've really created your first prototype of a very complicated process. So take cafex as an example. You, in the end, have so many touch points, so much electronics, so much manufacturing you're going to do. And if you're going to do those by prototyping in mechanical parts, it's going to cost you a lot of time and a lot of money. But instead, we can talk through these processes and these scenarios in a very streamlined, straightforward way, and yet have a very clear idea of what we're trying to build and what the repercussions of those decisions are before we get into actual nuts and bolts. Efficient decision making, like I talked about, we all know why we made these decisions. So when it comes time to pivot, clear-eyed pivots later, we're going to find out later that the kind of screen that we imagined on it is going to be expensive, and we can make decisions based on these principles that we all understand about whether that's a good compromise or not. It might be, oh yeah, we can achieve everything we want to achieve for our customer with a lower resolution screen. We can redesign parts out of that screen that were nice to haves but not necessary, because we understand what their MVP is. We can make those decisions very easily and clearly later on, and we're not surprised by anything that comes up later because we've seen everything through. So you really do save time and money by doing this quick sort of strategy sprint before you get into the actual building of the process. And that's what I've got. Sure.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. We really appreciate those wonderful insights. What we can do now is jumping into the Q&A section of today's Lens session and kind of go from there. So as someone who leads, UX at Ammunition, and I'm sure, even working at Ammunition is very competitive. Are you involved in the recruiting process to bring on UX designers? And if you are, what do you look for in a portfolio?
Well, it's interesting because, as you see, I actually have some slides I left out of this, which is like how UX at Ammunition and how we describe it is quite different from how, if you advertise for a UX designer, what you might get in resumes. And so usually UX is seen as screen design, essentially. And it's part of what we do. So after we go through the process I just showed you, we do actually start designing any of the screens that need to be designed. But that is a sort of a small part, not a small part, but not the lion's share of what we do. I think you would call what we do maybe, or what I showed you, kind of service design versus that. So I've actually started, we get probably, if I put out a job thing, we'll get hundreds of resumes, of course. I think any design studio does. But I really look for people who show a sort of systems thinking and a way of thinking through problems, a lot of enthusiasm for solving problems. I kind of initially, just because the way we're built at Ammunition, I sort of screen out the ones that are more focused on visual design of screens and are thinking more about the underlying systems, who can show the thinking through the personas, through the implications for features. Also looking for a real aesthetic sense, also looking for a sense of humor, also looking for, a flexibility because of all the different kinds of projects that we do. So it's gotten to the point where I actually love to see liberal arts degrees, because it's a way of thinking about analyzing issues more than design degrees. A combination of the two is great. And I've come to give a very lightweight test just to see if people think of can think through the problems in the way I think is necessary at Ammunition. I've just started doing that recently. And I found it to be pretty useful. And I really try not to burden people with this and I've tried to make it so it doesn't take more than, a couple hours. And I hope that if people really are going to be interested in the kind of work we do, I'm hoping they'll find that test is actually fun to do. I would find it fun to do. So it's another kind of indicator.
That's good. Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Let's put people on the spot with this test.
I don't make them do it in front of me. I just send it home and I say, if you're interested, do this.
As a UX designer, how do you like working in the world of industrial product design, working at Ammunition?
Well, I love it, of course. One of my precepts as a UX designer is I think all good designers are UX designers. Industrial designers who are good designers are, of course, thinking about the human factors and how people are responding to their products. And all digital designers who are good designers are thinking of book designers, packaging designers. They're all, and everyone at UX at Ammunition who's a designer, of course, thinks in terms of the user experience. I think what we offer in that context is we cross the T's. I think in any design discipline, the boundaries between one and another are always very fluid. So what's the difference between someone who's doing the UX of an app versus the visual design of it? Those could be the same person. Those could also be the same person doing the coding, but there just becomes places where it makes sense to draw the line so that you can focus. Right. And so I think what we do is, I think that industrial designers have come to appreciate that by the time they get the task of doing the industrial design, a lot of the requirements are worked out for them. So the industrial designers at Ammunition have a lot of input into the interface. I mean, they pretty much design the interface of the hardware. So we say, hey, it needs to be able to show these things, and you need to be able to control these things on the hardware. And then they design the switches, the lights, everything, the interfaces in a much more beautiful way than we ever could. So there's that nice interaction between our expertise and their expertise. And then we become, after that, just a kind of the stand-in for the user. So during the detailed ID process, we will be part of the design reviews, and just bring that eye of the user going, well, because we know this process and we know that all the tasks and have that in the front of our minds, we can say, there might be an issue with this particular way it's executed, and then they will respond to that. And I think it works really well to have that kind of split of the minds where they can focus on materials and structures and engineering questions and all those things. And we can say that needs another state of that light.
Right. Now, during your presentation, you talked about, creating personas for your clients and asking the right questions. At Ammunition, have you ever experienced clients that provide their own user research? Usually
Yeah.
not, usually not like user experience oriented, but maybe they don't understand the importance of a new research process.
And sometimes sometimes we just take it wholesale. We just actually finished a project, or almost finished a project, with a client who had quite a background in user experience. Actually, we have several we're working with right now who have their own teams doing their own research. And we're very grateful to accept anything we have. And we just see if we have any open questions that we need to answer in the context of this particular project, or that they might have thought of. We might do additional research. Often we'll just take what they've got and fit in that later research when we do the validation of the concepts. So that happened recently, where this client came to us with a lot of their own research, and we had a lot of knowledge just from what they gave us about what the habits, what was important to this audience, so we could start design. And then we did another round of research when we had some concepts to run by people.
Here's a really good question by Freddie, and his question is, how do you push the design envelope forward when what's easily understood already exists?
There's a use of patterns that is very important. So there's a lot of things you don't want to redesign because very useful patterns exist already for that. So shopping carts being an example of that. I think what we do is we start before we get to that point. So we're asking questions about, starting from first principles, what should this be? And we're not drawing on any patterns at that point. We're just saying, if this person wants this kind of experience and we have this kind of technology service to offer them, how should that come together? And then if you say, hey, we need a shopping cart, you pull on the patterns. But you don't begin by just grabbing things off the shelf. You begin by thinking of the ideal experience. And then when a pattern exists that fills that need, you draw on that pattern. But we don't default to that until it becomes clear that that's what's needed at that point.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, I know that, Ammunition being in the Bay Area, it's a very competitive environment, with clients, and even internally very competitive. And even the role of industrial designer is becoming quite complex, because we have to, have multiple skill sets and understand, multiple disciplines in business and marketing and things like that. Do you think that UX is another layer to add to the plate of what designers have to learn now, going into the design field, understanding, the basic principles of UX, and so like that they can succeed in a work environment like Ammunition?
Well, I think every environment's different. I think certain places you work, a UX designer also has to program.
Yep.
Industrial design also has to engineer. I think each workplace kind of breaks the disciplines up in a way that makes sense to them. At Ammunition, we have broken off UX as its own discipline in a very in a pretty clear way. And like I said, all the designers are very aware of user experience concerns, and they take that into account in their designs, but they don't need to have the detailed skills for doing, creating a research plan, or, working in certain software, or doing some things that, they're glad to have done, but, and are thinking it's important, but they don't need to do it themselves. I just really think each workplace kind of breaks it up in its own way.
Yeah.
And UX is its own discipline at ammunition.
Right. I know that, there's a lot of designers who go into industrial design and they end up shifting career paths into UX or vice versa, just because, of quote unquote, there's not enough opportunities for industrial design, and or another one is, you make more money as a UX designer and things like that. So those are common things that I hear a lot in industry.
Yeah.
Um,
The last UX designer we hired comes from a background in industrial design, which we love, of course, because they have knowledge about a lot of the things that are important to think about if you're thinking about hardware design.
Yeah.
But we force them to specialize. Just say, you have this background and that's great, but we're doing UX. And then the industrial designers are going to be doing industrial design.
For sure. Well, we can wrap things up with one last question. And this is a very interesting question. This summer I have the opportunity to drive multiple cars. I have a lot of siblings who have vehicles, and my girlfriend just got a new car, and noticed that the digital console is awful in every vehicle. Um, and there's a lot of articles that say that car companies have to somehow come to an agreement to have some type of consistency when it comes to that type of UX and UI, because it's pretty bad. Is there an example? I guess this might be a two-part question. What is your favorite UX object or interface, and then what is a good example of the worst?
I'm really bad at thinking of that one thing. But since you brought up cars, I do have a Tesla, and I think it's great.
Yeah.
And a part of it is just, I got the Model 3 that doesn't have any interface except for the screen. And I've been surprised at how well that works. And the last one I had was a Prius.
Okay, yeah.
And I almost just started a blog to write about all the things I hated about that one. There was like 45 buttons, not counting the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Just a lot of bad decisions on that. But
yeah,
I have no complaints about the Tesla interface, kind of at all.
Unfortunately, did not have access to a Tesla, but yeah, I did have access to a lot of Toyotas and Hondas and Chevys, but thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much, Sarah, for setting this up for ammunition, for always advanced design, and everyone who joined us today. This conversation, has been recorded and it'll be available for those who want to, reference it later, and geek out about UX design, which is a very important part of design. So Darcy, your time is much appreciated and your insights. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.